behavior based on real-world knowledge that they have seen out in the world, along with people that have contributed to the MITRE attack. And it's just phases of an adversarial life cycle, so you could equate it somewhat to the cyber kill chain, if you ever heard that. It's not exactly the same. Again, this starts post-exploitation, meaning they've already got a foothold in your organization. So we'll get into the tactics and techniques. So the tactics, there's 11 different tactics in the MITRE framework, going from left to right. Initial access was recently added, and when I say recently, it was added within the last maybe 6 months to a year. So the other 10, from execution all the way to the command and control, those are the subsets of where all these different techniques occur. Question I get sometimes when I do or I talk about MITRE is, which one do I think is most important when it comes to a tactic? To be honest with you, the sooner you can find someone, so recon, the better. However, the goal, in my opinion, of when you're looking to implement the MITRE attack framework is you want to make sure that you get bits and pieces out of each tactic, so you're covering 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 different techniques within each tactic, because you want this a sprinkle board, because the reality is, depending on your organization, we'll get in this a little bit, you might not see someone run an IP config or an ARP-A, right? Because that happens all the time in your organization. It's just tools that are used on a daily basis. But if you could catch them maybe running, you know, scheduled task or something to that nature, then you have at least a potential to stop them before they have the exfiltration part going on. Because obviously, in the end, there's only 2 things they want. They either want to exfiltrate data or they want to just mess with your systems and make them inoperable. More than likely, it's going to be exfiltrate data or, you know, encrypt your data so that you got to pay a big ransom. So techniques, so for instance, this is exfiltration, and this is just a small subset of the different techniques under the exfiltration tactic. And just to show you how often this stuff is updated, in January of 2018, which was the very first one released, there was 188 different techniques. In April of 2018, there was 219. And as of October last year, we're up to 223 different techniques, which is actually incredible if you think about it and the research. And we're going to go in just to a little more depth. This isn't really a talk about the MITRE attack framework. It's just to give you a subset of how you take this, turn it into an actionable piece of code, which is Atomic, by the way. Love the team at Atomic. They're a great bunch of guys, really smart. And then you take your Atomic framework and you put that into an automation framework, which is, in this case, we're talking MATE, but there's a bunch of others out there, and I'll get into them. So here's just an example. This is hard to read. That's okay. I'm going to point some things out that are important. The first is the name description. So this particular technique is T code T1136, but it's create account. So this falls under the technique specifics, which would be this box. This is directly off MITRE's website. I can tell you they recently, in the last 3 months, went away from JSON and now are using Stix Taxi. So if you have the capability to use Stix Taxi in your organization or your lab, you can suck all this in real time as it's being updated. So that's a good piece of work from them. So over there you got the specifics, so it tells you what type of tactics. So remember, you had the bar across the top, so this is persistence. The platforms it operates on, which in this particular example, it is Linux, Mac OS, and Windows. They do give you the permissions required, so obviously you have to be an admin in this particular instance. And then some data sources, and what data sources are would equate back to what your EDR solution is. So for instance, to really catch create account, you need to be doing some process monitoring, command line parameters, authentication logs. Those are the type of data sources that will help you find create account. The next thing up is the known adversaries using the tactics, techniques, and procedures. What's really cool, and this is almost on every single one of their techniques, is that they give examples of actual real real world adversaries that are using or did use this certain technique. So like APT3 and a few others here that you might have heard of use this particular technique when they pwned whatever organization they pwned. Mitigation controls, this is important for, like, do you have the control? Will your EDR solution be able to implement, you know, this particular mitigation? In this instance, probably not, but it tells you what to do. How do you make sure create account works or isn't as easy to do? Multi-factor authentication is one. There's a lot other. And then this is the part that you want to build in, detection. So this is what your EDR solution should be looking to do to detect this specific technique. In this particular instance, if I was going to try to create account, I would look for event ID, and I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, 4620 something maybe. I cannot recall, but there's a specific event ID, Windows ID, that would actually trigger as soon as a local account was created. You'd want your EDR or your logs, your SIM, whatever you're using, to trigger an offense or an alert based on that particular Windows event code or event ID. One quick thing too that I didn't comment on, down here in almost all their techniques too are references. So you can actually go look up where they got this data from, whether it's a Dragos report or a Verizon report or actual pen testers or people that were in the incident response of said event. They comment in here, so it's really good, so you can go pick up other ideas, because to be honest with you, they do, 4720 is the idea. They do some detections, but if you dive down into some of these, they might give you some other ideas that you may be able to implement with your EDR solution. So what's the benefits of this? Help identify process technology gap. For one, I will guarantee you, if you go down the MITRE road looking at MITRE techniques and you compare that to what your EDR solution can actually detect, whole different ballgame of what an EDR solution says they can actually detect versus what reality is. It improves, obviously, your security posture because these techniques are used in real-world scenarios by adversaries, so you know that at least one of these techniques are going to pop in your organization should you already get breached. You can prioritize your work when you're working on MITRE. So for instance, I showed you like initial access or recon, or maybe you care more about pivoting or exfiltration. You can work on that specific column. I just warn you that you don't want to just focus on a single tactic column. You want to focus on multiple techniques across all the different tactics. So you have a better, wider net to hopefully catch them. And then evaluate new security technology. MITRE just got done at the end of 2018. They actually did a EDR vendor evaluation based on their framework. I can tell you CBR, Carbon Black was one of them. Symantec, I think, was another. And they had 8 or 9 that went through their first evaluation. So if that's one of your EDR solutions, it's worth going and read the eval and see what was caught and what wasn't. Low-cost testing. Everything we're going to talk about tonight is free, so it really costs you nothing other than time. Now, that being said, my assumption is you already have an EDR solution in-house. I will show you tonight. We're using a free one called Sysmon, and it's really good. If you don't or you have not used Sysmon, you're going to be thoroughly impressed, I think, later. And then information sharing, right? So again, like I said, I'm a red teamer, but a more purple teamer. When we do our scenarios, real-world scenarios, we purposely try to hit some of the MITRE techniques and tactics to ensure that our EDR solution is actually catching those techniques. Now, we might not come blazing out of the gate trying to fire them off because we have other objectives, but during the course of the assessment, we will definitely hit some of the MITRE ones to make sure that, hey, we're being a little noisy now. You guys should see us, right? And this way you can validate not only your EDR solution, but your SIM solution, something like that. And then finally, it can actually help you budget for new technology, because what you're going to see, there's not a single EDR solution out there that can catch all techniques or tactics. So what you'll come up with as you work through this with your team, a group, whoever, is you're going to come up with what we did as a heat map, and it just is a color-coded chart to show where our strengths and our weaknesses are. And that way it helped define our EDR solution to say, hey, we can't cover anything that requires API calls out. There's just no way you see that. So that's a big gap for us. We need to look at technology X, Y, or Z. All right, test detection technology, huh? All right, so validate and tune for adversarial techniques. I am going to caution you, this is not a silver bullet, and the reason I'm saying that, and you'll see this as we go along, you will know about a tactic, you'll know about a technique, and Atomic Red Team, Red Canary, will give you the makings of the code used to fire such technique, and you can go find that in your EDR solution. However, in a real organization, and I'll just take Consumers Energy for instance, ipconfig is under T1016 for reconnaissance, trying to figure out, you know, what's my IP address, what's my domain name. I don't know about your orgs, but I can tell you ipconfig is ran 1,000,000 times in an organization. So that being said, you will have to tune and sometimes in some events take out certain commands or processes within a certain technique to make it even viable in your organization. And it's just one of those games that you got to tweak until it's an actionable alert, because if they're always going off, it's not helping your analyst at all, as they're responding to just a bunch of noise, and it's doing no good while the real attackers get in. So just forewarning. Lots of options. So Red Canary, Atomic Red Team, they make what is called the Atomic Red Team, and we'll get into that specifically here in a minute. But those are specific block codes of you know, commands, processes, DLLs, all kinds of tidbits that you can, written in YAML, that you can actually just copy and paste right into a Windows command line for the most part and run the actual technique that should trigger the T code. MITRE makes an application called Caldera, which it was really, really good. I know they're currently working on a major update. It's a good application in an enterprise environment because what it allows you to do is install agents on other workstations so you can expand out to look and do better pivoting and exploitation. However, they haven't updated it, so I don't want to say where it stands right now. One I forgot to list on here that's really good and you have to go look at is called Endgame RTA. Really good product. It's written in Python. And it does some really cool stuff. You have a lot of control over it. And then finally, we'll talk about Mate, and we'll get into what Mate is, but it's written completely in PowerShell. It runs on any system. All you need is PowerShell, and you should be good to go. And then finally, this is the whole purpose of this. You're going to execute the technique, you're going to collect the evidence, and then you're going to go develop your offense, your alert, whatever you call it in your organization, and you will repeat. And I will guarantee you, as you're building these alerts, you will have to repeat over and over and over again just due to noise in your organization. All right, Red Canary, Atomic Red Team. So they emulate like a boss. So what are they? They're a library of tests. They're little modules. They're stored in YAML files, so it's easy to consume YAML into your testing framework or your automation framework. And it allows testing of pretty much, I want to say they have over 100 techniques covered now. I think that's what it is. We'll see. 120 and growing. These guys are always updating techniques. If you don't follow Red Canary on Twitter, and you're a Twitter, you need to follow them. They have a guy named Casey Smith. He goes by Sub-T. Guy is one of the smartest guys, man. He does a lot of this MITRE work and does a lot of the coding. Portable detections, they work on Windows, Mac, and Linux. Mate, I will tell you, works only on Windows systems, so it'll work on the PowerShell and the command line environment. A colleague of mine is currently working on what we're going to call Late, which will be a Linux-based solution that will run Linux tests. And then it consists of scripts, DLLs, command lines, and more, and we'll get into an example here. So this is what, this is T1016 actually. This is what the YAML file looks like. The top is the name, so you know what it does, and the display name, so roughly this, if you go to MITRE T1016, it would tell you that this is System Network Configuration and Discovery. Just a brief description, like what's it doing? It's doing some network configuration information. Supported OSs, so this particular T code, if you ran it command line by command line, it would support both Windows, Mac, and Linux. Oh, you hate when I move, huh? Sorry. And then executor and command. So what this is what it takes to execute. So for in this instance, on Linux, you'd be running from a shell, and this would be the command you run from shell. For Windows, this would be, again, I alluded to this earlier, ipconfig all, nbtstat -n. This is what you would run from cmd.exe in the Windows command line. Again, I'm not sure how often, but I'm going to bet if you're in an organization, at least 2 of these commands up here are run a bajillion times in your org. So that's where you would have to make the decision to say, okay, we can't look at ipconfig. That'll be a black hole, per se, on this particular technique. So let's get to automation and talk about MATE. So MATE stands for MITRE ATT&CK Emulation. And this is just a brief thing of what it is. Again, shout out to Casey Smith, sub-T. He originally, a couple years ago, created Invoke Atomic, which was just a basic PowerShell script that gave me the idea to write this. And then it uses, and I'll show you, it uses modified atomic red team YAML files. So I take what Red Canary has developed and I modify it and give it a little more information and substance. And you'll see that here in a second. But it creates objects for each test, and then objects automate execution of the attack techniques. Written in PowerShell. One disadvantage, I'm not going to say it's a disadvantage, could be an advantage in your organization, is it currently only runs locally on the system. So, I mean, it's up on GitHub. You just download the repo, and you're just ready to go. And you can run all the techniques that are covered right there. Operates on Windows 32 or 64, and I just released version 2 last week that now allows you to do variable behavior, and we'll get into that in a second. Right now, 40 techniques. What's nice about MATE, you can easily create your own, and you can modify your own. It's really simple, you'll see. And what's nice, what's different about MATE versus a couple of the other ones, like just the Red Canary Atomic Red Team, is this actually is a library. So what I've done is I pulled in all the different techniques, so you can use this as a library. So if you wanted to go look up T-code T1095, you would be able to do that within MATE. It'll tell you what it is and the commands it takes to actually invoke it. And then the other nice thing, which the other open source projects do this as well, but it captures artifacts of the emulated technique. And why that's important is you need to be able to validate the dates, times, the PIDs, and the execution to your EDR solution to make sure it's catching what it should catch. And this is a MATE example, and you're just going to see some slight differences. It's still in YAML, so these are all written in YAML as well. You have the name just like you did on theirs. The tactic has been added, and the description has been added, so it's all included in one. And then the goal. So what is the goal of this particular technique? This one is to enumerate configurations. I moved the platforms. The only reason I did that is for the automation piece that you'll see later. And then these are the executor and commands. So even if I don't, even though it does not support Linux, I still include the Linux commands there. They just won't trigger or run because it's purposely, commented out, and there isn't an executor written for Linux or Mac. So this is where everything probably fails, but we're going to give it a shot. We're going to try a demo, and every time I do demos, I usually fall on my face, or the demo does.
You got this.
I know. So I'm going to give you an overview of what's going on here. So for our SIM, we're going to be using ELK. If you haven't used ELK, phenomenal tool. It's free. It's a really, really good tool. For the EDR solution, we will be using Sysmon 8.0. They just released 9, but I'm running 8. And then for the alerting mechanism, I'm running what's called Elasta Alert, which is put out by the team from Yelp. And it's open source as well, but what it allows you to do is generate alerts based on information that is inside Elasticsearch and create email notifications, or you can do it through Slack or any of those things. So let's see what happens here. That's a good start. Can everyone see that? Great, because I can't. All right. All right, so I've already Mates installed on this, the repo. It comes up. So what you got here? Yes, sir.
We have one question from the internet asking if ELK has any type of EPS limits.
As I have currently used it in my experience, not presently. Okay. But I'm sure it does. But you put Kafka on the front of it, and it'll probably take care of that.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So what we're going to do here, what you do, you set a working directory, and this loads the techniques. You can list all the loaded techniques, so that's the library feature I talked about. You can list a specific technique and information, and then you invoke the test. So we will go ahead and hopefully load these tests. Oh, whoops. So I did do a little upfront work, so I didn't have to type as much. So I'm loading the tests, and what this is, the output, so I said I save the evidence. Whatever directory you write here is where the evidence will be saved. There's all the techniques. They're just being loaded. So I think I've done 40-ish. So all my techniques are loaded. So now if you just wanted to quickly list, it does 10 at a time. It'll stop just to show you the difference. So here's the technique, the ID or the T code, the tactic it's under, the platform it's going to run on, and the description of what an adversary is doing, why they would be running that technique. So now I'll show you the difference between a specific. So we're going to actually pick on one T code today as a test, and we're going to pick on T1060, which is current run, so run folders and startup folders as a technique. This would be a persistence technique. It's pretty common because as an attacker, if a person reboots their box or goes off net and back on, you need a way to get back on their box. So again, you got the technique, the tactic, the platform, the description, but a little more in-depth detail. These are the exec commands that are going to run when I run this technique. So you can see it's going to try to add a registry key under the current user, and then it's going to, and these are all the different types of ways you can make this persistence work. It's going to try to do another reg key to the run once, and then this is the Windows PowerShell. Multiple ways to do this in PowerShell. The first one, again, is just setting a registry key. The second one is actually going to, what's nice about Mate is you can write your own PowerShell scripts and execute those. It's smart enough to know that that's a PowerShell script, and it will run it as it's coded. Couple things to note here. I tried my best that if I added a key, I delete the key, because obviously you don't want this stuff sitting around your environment. So again, check the code, but it should delete the key. Another caveat for this particular one, it's going to work only because I elevated myself. And you could see at the end on some of the techniques I put requires elevated access. So you can, as a regular user, write to HKey current user. That's nothing stops you. However, as an attacker, you can't write to HKey local machine as a regular user, and you can't write to what's the other one? There's an HKey current users with a plural. You can't write. You're only allowed to. So for this particular technique to work, all of it, you would have to be elevated or have elevated privileges on the machine you're running. If you weren't elevated, what would happen is mate will still run through this. It'll successfully add the key, the top one. It'll not be able to add this one because that requires elevated, and it won't be able to add this one either. The script will run. You'll still get evidence of this actual technique that ran. The other two will be documented in your evidence. However, it won't trigger your EDR because the reality is I never wrote to that registry key. So let's hope this works. All right, so we're going to invoke that T160. And what's going to happen now is, again, I said variable. This just happened in version 2, and I think it's pretty slick. Anyway, so what it's telling you here, hey, we're running from the command prompt. I'm going to invoke this test. This is what we're going to do. Oh, by the way, anytime this is the variable, meaning when you have a pound followed by an open curly bracket, close curly bracket, that is waiting for user input. So this is saying, hey, I want to run something called atomic red team and the thing to execute. So that's what it's waiting for. Because it's variable, you can put whatever you want in. I suggest using the scripts and the tools that are already included with mate, which in this particular instance is this one. And you can go, again, this is all open source code. So you go look at what Hello World Bat is. So it's running it. Told you it captured it. We'll get into this in a second. Invoking, it deleted it. I don't care about deletes because the technique is actually looking for create, not deletes. And now it's going to the next test, which is going to add it to run once X. So again, it's asking for the same input. So I'll just put that in there. There's a command it ran. And now it's moved on to PowerShell. So for this particular one, it again is just asking for this batch file. So what will happen is you should, oh, you can't see it. It's all right. You couldn't see that one because it popped up on my screen. As the techniques are running, you actually will get a pop-up on the screen showing you that, hey, something's running, so you're just not sitting there. So we're going to run this PowerShell, because now what it's asking for is not what you're going to run or the thing to execute, but the actual PowerShell script to run. So if I hit this, so you get a screen like this as it's running. I have a pause in here so you know something's happening, because the question might come up, how do you know you're really creating a registry key? I put a pause in there, so if you wanted to go look at the registry key as it's doing it before I delete it. So there we go. That was mate. It ran through just T1060. Now let's go check out the temp directory, because that was the directory. I lost my mouse. There we go. Let's see here. Oh, did I not spell temp right? Oh, I did. Phew. Okay. So here is the two files that are created. So depending on the type of executor, whether it's command line or whether it's PowerShell, all techniques will be put into either one of those files. We'll take a look at the command line file first. So this is what you get in the command line file, and this is how you go compare this to your EDR solution. So what you got, you could say I ran these at 736 and 737, what was done, what was loaded, and then more importantly, not only the command but the PID. This is really important because I've seen sometimes when testing that we thought it was being captured, but it was the wrong PID. So it was catching another aspect potentially of the code. So it's good to cross-compare, and you'll see that here in a second. And then PowerShell is the same way. I'll leave that one open, and we'll just look at PowerShell. And so here's the PowerShell. And then again, same concept. You can see what's done here. You can't see what's in this PowerShell script. Obviously, you can, but it's not going to tell you every single command that was ran in that PowerShell script, but you can find that. So now we're going to go look at our EDR solution. Hopefully this works. All right, so I created this demo dashboard here to try to get rid of some of the noise. And let me just refresh this thing and hopefully, yay! Oh, right, that is good. Good, everything's working right now. All right, so this is our EDR solution. I purposely have this dashboard configured to show this particular T code. And what I mean by that is I'm looking for registry values, either set, delete, or create, because that's what I care about. You know, someone's writing to the registry in this particular example. So what you have here is the registry run key. So you could see something was run out of current version run. You could tell that set, create, and delete occurred somewhere in there. And then these are all the different words or details of what was ran. So if we go in and I really care, now this isn't going to be a great example, but if I care just about create, is that create? I can't see. Yeah. So if you click on this, it gets rid of, so now I'm down to, hey, reg.exe was used to modify the registry to put something in it. So there was a create key done by reg, and if you remember in the T code, it actually from the command line called reg.exe, create, and then the key. So I know there's something of value there going after that. So what I would do next, again, this is just a demo. And what's that say? Last 15? Great. So let's just do reg.exe. This is just a poor man's way of really quickly, hopefully trying to find. There we go. So what you should start to see, is we'll just pick on, let me see, we'll pick on third one down. So this will expand the actual message. And this is what you would see in the sim, except I can't see my down little thingamaboppy. Oh. Okay, I'm going to cheat 1 second so I could see. There we go. All right. So if we now see the actual, you could see the whole packet, everything that's contained in your solution. So you could see regex, it was run. This one was PowerShell, and then the parent process ID. So what I could really look for is I could go back to my file that Mate created and look up process ID, blah, 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 and it better match exactly what you put in. But one thing better is, as part of any good EDR solution should do, it should alert you that something happened. And this is where I think the power of Elastic and ElastiAlert, in my opinion only, excels at things that certain SIMs and EDR solutions can't currently do because it's so customizable. So you could tell there was 2 triggers, and that makes sense. So there was 2 different techniques I actually ran, one by PowerShell, one by command line, that triggered 2 events. So if you actually go look at the event right here, what's nice about this one, so this was the registry startup key, but this one was run by regex. It was a set value. It set it to this key as my GUID. This is the actual registry key, and this is the value I set on next runtime, so whatever was in hello world.bat. So I got notified, and I know the process ID, 8968. And if you actually go back to the command line evidence, which should be here, 8968, there it is right there. So we know for a fact that our EDR solution caught it. We were alerted. Everything matches, including the detonation, or I should say the value being set. And then the last piece of that is the reason the 2 were generated is this was actually PowerShell. The difference being, instead of setting a registry key, I actually created a file in the startup folder on my Windows box that when it starts every time, it's going to call notepad.link, which actually notepad.link is just calling hello.bat. So this is another way. So again, I should be able to go look at my PowerShell log from mate.
Thank you for running away.
Oh, yeah. So we look at PowerShell, and then, gosh, it's so weird with the mouse. So we should see, what was it, 1160? So it's right there. This PowerShell script, and if I go show you the PowerShell script inside of it, it literally creates a link file on your startup folder calling back to bat, hello world.bat. So what we've done here is you took a MITRE tactic that you wanted, or technique that you wanted to work on to have your EDR solution detect on. You then went to Atomic. You figured out what code it takes to fire that technique, and then you used mate to automate it. So the reason you want to automate is you can get through a bunch of these really quick and test over and over and over again, because I'm going to tell you, you're going to be tweaking your alert and your notification within your EDR a bunch. So the more you can automate, the better it is. And with that, I'm so happy my demo worked. I don't know what to say. Where'd it go? Oh, I don't have it. With that, that's the end of the presentation, other than I'm open for questions. Yes, sir.
One question from Internet Land. Actually, hold on. What's the difference between emulating and a real attack? And the intent behind this is kind of like, could a wannabe red teamer use this to do actual attacks, or would they be better off doing something else?
So, good question, actually. What's nice about this, even if you don't use Atomic, Red Team, or Mate, if you actually go read all the code that are contained in every single one of these code snippets, it's a wealth of knowledge, because it tells you so many different ways to do something that you might be the smartest guy when it comes to Windows and Linux. I will guarantee you don't know every way you can set a registry key. Or you might know 2 ways, but there's 4 ways in here. So if anything, just go review the actual code that's being executed, because no matter what, an attacker will have to run one of these once they've gained access. They might run it a different way, but the reality is if PowerShell calls CMD, then calls reg.exe, I'm not saying you would do that, you will fire on the reg.exe because that's what you were looking at. You might not catch them on PowerShell, but you will catch them on reg.exe. So if you do red teaming at your organization, you should incorporate some of these MITRE techniques, meaning that let's say you've been in for a week, the blue team isn't catching you. Maybe fire off a couple of these that you know the EDR solution should be tuned to catch you with. So does that answer your question? Great.
Another one.
Another question from the internet. What percentage of mate testing can be detected by your current ELK Sysmon solution?
Because it's a demo too currently, because I haven't taken the time to just configure. That's a whole different talk. But two, I will tell you, a last alert along with ELK, there is no, I haven't ran into a complex enough query yet to stop either one of them. The language itself is so complex, and you can get so minute on how you do detection. Like, for instance, some of the things that fail, I'll just give you real world experience, is the SIM. Like, let's say you're looking for a brute force attack on usernames and passwords. Finding a nice line of, is it 50 passwords being tried by on one account or 50 accounts within a minute, is almost impossible to do in a SIM. However, the way ELK works and it indexes, it's much quicker to read data, especially real time, and it allows, Elastor allows you to do frequency-based queries. So you can literally say, okay, if you see query A, and within 5 minutes you see another query A that contains either 50 different user accounts or one, fire the alert. That's hard to do in the SIM. I'm not saying it can't be done. Splunk and others, I don't have any idea how they work. But it's just some of the coolness I've seen with ELK and Elastalert. As you can tell, I'm a big fan. Yes.
From the internet land says that he just volunteered you for a new talk. It may also be your boss.
Yeah, okay. Anyways, but any other questions? Like I said, if you want to talk offline about elk and a last alert, I'm more than happy to talk about it. It's a cool thing. But I'm not disparaging any other EDRs. They're all good. Yes, sir. Oh. Oh, way to not pay attention, Kyle. Well, hey.
So you said that you were working on a Linux variant of this, or a friend of yours was. Is it because the different file structures and things like that? Are you aware that PowerShell is now open source and available for Linux?
So interesting. Yes, I did know a WSL. Is that what it's called, right? Or I think it's
Not
WSL.
sure off the top of my head.
Windows subscripting.
Script from Windows box to a Linux box, the portability.
Oh, yeah. So what we would do, just the colleague his is written specifically in Python. So literally, you could probably take his code and run it on a Windows box if you had the Python interpreter. What I want to do, a future release of Mate, and it's down the road, probably version 3, will actually start utilizing the Linux subsystem of Windows to test this, so you can do it all in the same box, whether it's Linux or Windows. That's a future enhancement that I'm thinking in the back of my mind, because I know organizations are starting to go to Linux for Windows, is what I've heard, so I need to get in front of that. Anything else? Great. Appreciate everyone's time. Thanks a lot. Dude, I really don't.
You should say to the internet, thank you, internet.
Thank you, Internet, for listening. I hope it was of value.